Nowadays, we live in a capitalist society in which everything works in an interdependent network of webs and markets that exchange, well, everything. In other words, everything carries an exchange value and has been commodified in some way. For example, comedians have commodified the act of telling jokes through comedy shows, or with the rise in popularity of OnlyFans, people have begun to commodify their bodies. Yet before the establishment of market societies and economies, goods were produced rather than commodities. And as Varoufakis said, it was produced outside the circuit of commercial transaction. In other words, within the household or the community. Farming households, which were the majority of the population at that time, could produce their own food, tools, and clothing, and during the occasional good harvest, exchange the surplus that they had with other farmers for products they didn't have access to. Varoufakis also explained, for much of human history, a household economy mainly produced goods, but only occasionally produced commodities. So how did we go from societies with markets to market societies? Well, there are three basic things that need to be commodified in order for a market society to form. The first is land or space in which production can take place. The second is raw materials or capital goods. And the last one is labor. In early societies, none of these were commodified, as land was something you were born into and was never sold. Labor was normally forced upon slaves and serfs who worked on the land and who couldn't sell nor rent their labor, and raw materials like cotton or grains were normally produced by the slaves and serfs. So now you're probably asking, how did these three factors suddenly commodify? And to that I answer, boats. To be more specific, big boats that allow transoceanic travel and global trade to take place. Once global trade routes were created, European merchants could trade wool from Britain for Chinese silk for Japanese swords, and Japanese swords for Indian spices, then Indian spices for a large profit back in Europe. Through this, these goods were given international market values, and the merchants gained vast amounts of wealth. This caused the landowners, who wanted to join in on the wealth, to suddenly kick the serfs off their land and replace them with sheep, starting Britain's enclosure movement. So, after being kicked off the land, the serfs needed a way to put food on the table. So they began selling their labor, causing the birth of the labor market and the commodification of labor. The enclosure movement also caused the commodification of land, as landowners began renting their land out relative to the price of wool, which meant land also now had a market value. So, all in all, due to the beginning of global trade and the enclosure movement, Britain was able to make a shift from a society with markets to a market society, and later become the heart of the Industrial Revolution, and as a result, caused the commodification of everything.